I'm just counting, so I don't know. Like I tell them.
Are you going? Are you ready? Okay. Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of presenting our next speaker. She's a popular speaker and performer who shines a light on professional, personal, and social issues. Mary Carouba is a gifted storyteller who inspires and entertains. Using real-life, poignant examples of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, Mary vividly demonstrates to audience members the possibilities of their own lives. Mary is the co-author and critically acclaimed Women at Ground Zero, Stories and Courage of Compassion, a book that honors the women heroes of 9/11. The challenging process of finding the women heroes and giving voice to their powerful and moving stories as Mary's own Ground Zero, and the lessons she learned about taking risks, moving forward in the face of fear, and overcoming seemingly impossible odds become the cornerstone for a powerful series of inspirational presentations. Mary delivers her popular presentation to corporate groups, first responders, universities, and colleges, nonprofit organizations, and community groups. She also performs on international cruises. Mary is currently working on a book and a one-woman play, The Life, Death, and Other Comedies. I'd like to introduce Mary Carouba.
Thank you very much, although I am no longer performing on international cruises. Let me just say that. That's out for the moment. And one thing I want to say before we get started is that the young people that are all here that you see at these desks working and here, they have put so much time and energy into this week. It really is unbelievable. It is. To put something like this together is huge, and there's all these fights along the way and issues. I mean, it's a lot to put something like this together. And then to have the coronavirus undercut this whole week and undercut attendance. I literally thought there'd be like 2 people here, like 2 of my friends, you know. This has got to be very, very difficult for them. So please give them a lot of love and, you know, appreciation, because the whole thing is set up so beautifully. And the only thing missing are all the people. And that's just the way it is right now. Yesterday I was in San Francisco at my brother's strip club. My father owned strip clubs in San Francisco from the 60s on. And then my brother took over the family business, you know. And so he's got these strip clubs like the Hustler, the Penthouse, the Gold Club down in downtown San Francisco. So I went to visit him yesterday, and I had to walk through one of the clubs to get to his office. And it was completely empty. A strip club, I can't emphasize that enough. They have been in this business, you know, my father and then my brother, since the 60s. And my brother has also been in the donut business. And so he said for years that the 2 things that are completely recession-proof are donuts and strip clubs. And he was right. Through everything, through wars, through 9/11, through massive tragedies. But now, the coronavirus, that club is empty. So to me, although it might sound silly that I'm talking about an empty strip club, for me, that was a barometer. That was like the bees dying. You know, it seems like a little thing, but it's a harbinger of much bigger things. So I say all that to say I really appreciate that you guys did come out today to hear this presentation. And I've asked myself at times, because this was 18 years ago now that my co-author Susan Hagen and I wrote this book, and I never try to promote this talk. I never try to get talks. I only do a talk if somebody asks me to come out and do it, and then I'll do it. And lately I've asked myself the last year or so, is this still relevant? Is there a reason to still be talking about women in non-traditional fields and the importance of women in these different roles? Is it important? And then I heard the news and heard some study that had just been done, and they found that the majority of Americans felt that a woman presidential candidate would be unable to beat Donald Trump. And I thought that was so interesting. You're telling me that, let's say, an Elizabeth Warren couldn't beat Trump, or any of the women. And so just the fact that people still have that belief system, like women are fine as far as it goes, but they can't do everything. That's sort of the belief system. I mean, when it comes to something as important as a president, we've got to stick with the old white guys, you know, we can't be messing around with these women. I think it'll change in the next election. I think that's going to be the turning point. But right now, it is still really a thing for women. And when we wrote the book, I was a social worker in Child Protective Services in Sonoma County, doing investigations of child abuse. So I dealt a lot with first responders, police officers, EMTs, firefighters. And my co-author at the time was a firefighter in Sonoma County. And we were watching all the news, of course, like everyone. Now, I see some people in here that would have been full-on adults, 9/11, but we also have some people in here, you're probably like little kids, 9/11, right? How many people in here were under the age of 10 when 9/11 happened? Okay. Oh, you're so young. Okay. And then how many of you weren't even born? Any weren't even born then? All right. A lot of times when I speak at junior colleges, there's students that weren't even born yet. So 18 years ago, you know, women were in a lot of fields, and women were in fire and police and all the rest of it, but it was still a struggle. It still wasn't as natural as in many places it is today. It was still difficult. And when 9/11 happened and we're watching the news and reading the reports and listening to the radio, we started hearing something in the language. You know, if you start paying attention to the language that's being used, if you come up and tell me that TV isn't racist, then I'll tell you you're not listening to the language. You're not reading between the lines. You're not really looking if you're telling me that there's full representation in TV and in movies, because there's not. And once you notice it, you can't not notice it. Like, I'm Arab, right? That's my family ethnicity, Arabic. And so I really notice it when they're doing a caricature of an Arab in a movie. The Arab is usually like the swarthy, evil one, or the belly dancing one. It's some kind of caricature that has nothing to do with what I know about Arabs. So I notice it. Somebody else watching TV might never notice that because it just doesn't hit something in them. Well, we noticed that everybody was using this language that belonged in the 1950s. It happened like overnight. All of a sudden, after all the gains women had made for all the years that they had tried to break into these fields, all of a sudden, after 9/11, it was like the coronavirus in that people were scared. People were really scared. They didn't know what was going on. They were nervous. They were scared. And everybody reverted back to some kind of little kid in a way that was waiting for the big, strong fireman to come save them, because the language changed overnight. Fireman, policeman, our brave guys, the brotherhood of the fire, the fire department, the brotherhood, all about the brothers, all about the men. And we heard all this talk about what was going on down at 9/11, how awful it was, the recovery of bodies, the incredible situation that the rescue workers faced down there, and all those guys, right? All our guys down there, all the men involved in the rescue and recovery efforts. Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at that time, and he was exactly who he is now then, too, by the way. Mayor Giuliani, he stood on the rubble of the World Trade Center 4 days after the attack, and he asked this large audience to stand and give a round of applause for the men we've lost and the men that are searching for survivors. As women lay dead in the rubble behind him, and women rescue workers were searching frantically for survivors. Then another one of my favorite people, President Bush, came down to the site, and he threw his arm, people my age are like, he threw his arm around a male firefighter, and said, I've come from Washington to New York to praise all of the men involved in this effort. And the top of my head just freaking exploded. That was it. I started screaming at the TV, and I was using some choice language in the moment against President Bush. And my friend Susan, who was watching it with me and had seen me getting so upset about all of this, she turned to me and she said, Mary, you gotta let it go. She said, what are you gonna do? There's nothing we can do about it. And the minute she said, there's nothing we can do about it, we just both sort of sat up and looked at each other. We just both realized what a lie that was, how weak it was to be so upset about something, so passionate about it, to feel that it's so wrong. And then your solution is to say, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'll just leave it. So we started talking, right? Well, if we could do something, what would we do? We started looking at our skills. For me, as an investigator, it's a weird thing, but like I found in doing my investigative work that I could really think like a criminal. I don't know what that says about me, but like if you're looking for a criminal, you have to ask the question, like, where would I be if I was that person? You sort of have to get into their mindset. And so I'm really good at sort of figuring people out, finding them, and then convincing them to talk to me. That's my skill set that I could bring to this project. And I'm a good writer. And Susan is a beautiful writer and a great editor and a firefighter. And we started talking and said, well, we could write a book. And we ended up making a commitment that night. We shook hands like idiots. We shook hands across the couch and said, we're writing this book no matter what. This was before I called the county to ask for several months off with a caseload that was over my head. This was before Susan called the fire department to try to get a leave of absence. And I felt so strongly about it. I'm not kidding you when I say, if they wouldn't have given me the time off, I would have left my career, sold my house, and financed this whole project like that. Once I got started, there was no turning back. We got the time off, and in this whirlwind, we ended up going to New York. And at the time, I was doing a lot of stand-up comedy. But after, it's like now, like with the coronavirus, it just changes things. After 9/11, a lot of my jokes were about my Arab relatives and about how they are. And I would do like Arabic accents and imitate my Aunt Lily and like Margaret Cho, if you've ever seen her, how she does a lot of stuff about her family and does the accents and all that. I sort of did that. And after 9/11, like I had this one joke that went, I'm half Arab and half Irish, which is so irritating because I constantly get pissed and take hostages, but then get drunk and forget where I put them. Okay, so that was a joke that I wrote at the time. And I really liked that joke. It just, you like that one. I really liked it because a joke, if you can get it simple enough and like, and you get that nice punchline, it's the most satisfying thing in the world. And it can take years. It took me about 3 years to get that joke exactly where I want it. And then 9/11 happened, and I couldn't get up on stage like that. And I did it one time on this cruise ship, and a woman comes up to me after and says, that was so brave. It's like, brave? I'm getting up and doing comedy and you're paying me. What's brave? I knew it was going to be some racist crap. I just knew it. And she said, oh, that you have the courage to talk about your Arab family. So it was a weird time. And so when I'm supposed to be doing these comedy shows, I would be doing fundraising for this new Women at Ground Zero project. And I would have Susan go out to her car and get her big fire boot and pass it around the audience and do fundraising for a trip. And by the way, Susan and I had this ongoing argument back then because I always called her firefighter clothes an outfit. I said, wear your outfit to the show, and then bring your boot. She's like, Mary, it is not a firefighter outfit, okay? This is firefighter gear. And I'm like, hey, the pants match the jacket. It's an outfit, bitch, all right? So just get over that little matching hat, too. And so it was like this really crazy time. We're raising money. Within weeks, we're on a plane. We're going to New York. This is less than 3 weeks after the 9/11. Annika, are you leaving? Thank you. That's Annika, the AV person, you guys. She helped me out. Thank you. All right. Yes, we're all focusing on you, but don't feel self-conscious. All right. Bye, honey. So we get to New York, and are any of you familiar with New York? Any of you been there? You have, okay. But you guys know about New York, right? Like you get a feel for it. What's one thing you think of when you think of New York? Like what do you think it would be like if you just landed in the middle of New York? Cold? What else? What would the energy be like? Lots of people. Noisy? Honking horns. That's something I love about New York, the way people just yell at each other all the time. I like that. It's so honest, you know, but it's noisy. It's a noisy place. There's a lot of car honking, a lot of yelling, a lot of street action. When we got there, 2.5 weeks after 9/11, it was quiet. It was quiet. It was weird. It's sort of like the coronavirus, like everybody started going inside, you know, and isolating. And it was weird because people were being so nice to each other. Like cars aren't honking, nobody's arguing. That's just unnatural for New York, you know? The cops, the women cops, they had a hard time after 9/11 with all these people coming up wanting to hug them, buy them coffees. And, you know, before 9/11, I'll tell you something about being a cop in New York City. You did not become a cop in New York City for glory. Not if you were a woman. If you were a guy, maybe you became a cop for power issues or something like that. But most of the women, it wasn't like that for them. These were like the kind of people, now after 9/11, it's different because they were made out to be like the big American hero. And now there's more people wanting to be cops and firefighters and all that. But at the time, they were treated like crap before 9/11. And then now, all of a sudden, people are coming up wanting to put their hands on them and hug them and love them. New York was just really, really different. We went down to the police department, and I don't know what I thought we were doing. These two hicks from Northern California are going to New York City Police Department headquarters to say that we want to interview their women police officers. They wanted nothing to do with us. I don't know if we thought we were going to like elbow Tom Brokaw out of the way, or, you know, we had made these IDs up, like sort of pretend journalistic IDs, but the person that made them too big. So it was like we're holding up this 5x7 card. It was just ridiculous, you know, and we're trying to get in to interview people. They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to talk to us at the fire department. So being an investigator, you find different ways to go in the back door. So I asked a taxi driver to take me to a bar near Ground Zero where women cops hang out after work. Because I figured there's always that bar, right? At least on TV cop shows, there's always like that bar. So this guy, this taxi driver, he didn't even say anything. He just started driving and brought us to this little bar in Greenwich Village called Ruby Fruits. And it's down, like an underground bar. And we climbed down these steps to this bar, this crowded bar filled with cigarette smoke. Back then, everybody was still smoking like 3 cigarettes at a time inside. So this place is filled with cigarette smoke and all these off-duty cops. And I'm standing on the steps, and in a sort of a moment of silence between the music, I made an announcement and said, "Excuse me, if there are any female police officers here who were at Ground Zero on 9/11, we'd like to speak to you." And these 3 women approach us. And at this time, we weren't familiar with the New York personality. And we weren't familiar with the New York police officer personality. It's a very distinct personality. And this is going to involve a little swearing when I tell you what they said to me. So is anybody going to have an emotional problem? Okay. I shouldn't put it like that because that's mocking. I really didn't mean for it to come out like that. All right. But I make this announcement. These women walk up to us, and the tallest one says, "What the fuck are you doing asking about women cops? What the fuck do you want?" And one of them's on crutches, the one on my left. And I said, "We're from California. We're writers. We're going to write a book about the women heroes because we haven't heard one thing about a woman hero. Not one article, not one show, nothing. And we're going to write a book." And I look over, and the woman on the crutches is crying. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but now I know you do not catch a New York City police officer crying in a bar. Okay, that's just not going to happen, especially in front of a stranger. I didn't know that then. She's crying, and she said she had just come from her precinct where she had a photo op, because, you know, these politicians, after these big catastrophes, they're just all over it, you know, with the photo ops and the this. And what was happening was that all these celebrities were giving gifts to the cops and the firefighters. They're giving things, they want to do something for them. So this cop, Carol Faulkner, was at this precinct for a photo op for her colleague, a male police officer, to get a trip to Hawaii for him, his wife, and his kids. Week-long trip to Hawaii, all expenses paid. I'm going to tell you something about the guy that got that trip. He wasn't even in New York on 9/11. It is so egregious that not only was he not in New York on 9/11, but the reason he wasn't in New York on 9/11 is because he was on vacation with his family. But this is the way the favors came down through the patriarchal structure. So you've got the police chief on top and then all of the bosses. And at that time, it was all still very, very, very male. And so she's standing there and has to do a photo op and smile for the camera when she's the real hero. She's on crutches. She's got bandages on the back of her head. She's had to retire from the police department and be on full-time disability because she can't function anymore as a normal person because of the injury she sustained on 9/11. And she has to watch a guy standing next to her who was on vacation with his family on 9/11 be given a trip to Hawaii. That was sort of the feeling of it at the time. So when she heard us acknowledging them, she started crying. And then it was on. From that moment on, it was on. It's a very small world in police departments, and New York City is no difference, even though they have thousands and thousands of cops. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows who did what. When it comes to something like 9/11, everybody knows who stole stuff. A lot of the firefighters stole things out of some of the stores. Everybody knows who was a hero. They know who was a coward. They know who ran, and they know who helped. And so once we got in with them, there was just no stopping. The only reason that we only have 30 women in the book is because that's as far as our finances took us. The way we did this trip is we put all our credit cards on a table. There were 6 of them. And we looked at the balance on each card, how much we had available. And that total balance, that was our budget for this whole project. And when we were done and we were broke, I used to joke that we were writing another book about our life story called Women at Income Zero, because we were just totally wiped out with all of this. And so that's why we only have 30 women and then 3 women who died in the book. There were a lot more than that. And we'd be in our hotel room and get a knock on the door like at 2 a.m, because that's how these cops are. It's so weird. It's like they have no sense of time or space, or, you know, they would just send people over to the hotel like 2 a.m. I'd open the door and there's somebody standing there in uniform going, Sergeant Paulo Castro told me I'm supposed to be in some book or something, so I could do it now. And be like, all right, put some tea on and interview her, because they were sending us all the people that they knew were most directly involved in this. And what happened when we started hearing these stories is that we ended up just being bowled over by these stories that we heard that had been nowhere on TV. No, to this day, you're not going to see it anywhere. And there were all these shows at the time, you guys. You know, you turn on the TV now and everything's coronavirus, like everything that you watch. Back then, it was 9/11. Everything. Wait, I totally forgot where I was going. This is menopause. Young people, take heed, because I just forgot what I was saying. Does anybody remember? I don't have like a rehearsed talk, so if I lose my place, turn on the news. Everything's 9/11. Oh, whatever. All right. So anyway, but it'll come back to me. But the thing was, the stories that we heard. This one woman Terry Tobin, she's now the deputy chief of police in New York, second in command. At the time, she was, I think, a captain, and she went running in. She was only half a block away when everything came down, and she was already very high ranking then. She could have easily run to headquarters, you know, but she put her athletic shoes on that she had in the trunk, and she went running in. And she's evacuating people. And when the first building came down, she got hit so hard in the back of her head with a piece of cement flying off the building. And she had a Kevlar helmet on that she had pulled out of her car. And you know, Kevlar is designed to take a bullet. She got hit so hard that it cracked the Kevlar helmet in half and went and hit her in the back of the head. After 9/11, she ended up losing every single one of her teeth, every single one, in her early 40s because she got hairline fractures in every tooth from that cement hitting. It also broke her ankle and gave her permanent hearing loss in one of her ears. And she still kept evacuating people. I admire her more than almost anybody I know because she is such a stand-up person. And the thought of her having been hit with that cement, has a broken ankle, permanent hearing loss, and is still going back in, getting people out, taking command of the situation. When the second building came down, a big piece of glass flew into the middle of her back, actually lodged into her back, was sticking out of her back. And she, at one point, when the first building came down, it was dusty, you know, she heard somebody crying, like over to her left. She heard this guy saying, look, just stay there, take shallow breaths, stay low. She grabbed his hand. She goes, I'm going to be right here. I'm with you, keeping him calm, right? And then when the dust cleared, she went to get up to pull him up, and it was just an arm. It detached from the person. Now she's looking all around for the body. This is the state she's in, and yet with all those injuries, with everything that happened, with this shard of glass still in her back, she's trying to evacuate people. She was responsible for getting thousands of people out of that building that day. When they came and told her, look, you've got to get to the hospital, they wanted to bring her down to the ferry to put her on the boat, take her to the hospital. She gets down there and she sees this reporter she knew whose legs were really mangled and he was in a lot of pain. And she said, because there's only one place left on the boat, she said, take him first, I'll get the next one. And you don't say no to Terry Tobin. So they did that. They loaded him on the boat. And then she said, when I asked her, what lesson did you take away from 9/11? Like if you were to give advice to somebody, what did you really take away from that day? She said, never, ever go out of the house without a good bra on. She told me, because they had to pull the glass out from her back. They literally had one leg up on this railing and one person's holding her and the guy's pulling it out and then somebody's standing there ready to staunch the bleeding, but they had to take her shirt off. And so she's standing down there on the dock and everybody from the ferry that's going to the hospital is leaning over the edge looking at her with her old ratty bra. So take it to heart, people, good underwear. And when I met her at police department headquarters in New York City, and she comes bounding into the room on crutches, bandages around her entire head, something going on with her jaw and something in her ear, you know, some kind of medical device. She comes bounding into the room. How you doing? And she's been like that consistently for 18 years that I've known her. Just an incredible person. We didn't hear one word about her. There was another woman, an EMT, that commandeered. She was in a medical gown. They had taken her to a hospital, had her hooked up to IVs on a medical gown, but she just had to help. She took out her own IVs. You know, she is an EMT. So she took out her own IVs and commandeered a motorcycle in her little hospital gown and went back down to the scene. And these women were unbelievable. And the more that we heard about them, the more we fell in love with them. And the more we fell in love with them, the more we wanted other people to know their stories. So I put together just a little film. It's very rinky-dink, you know, it's just narrated on the screen, like it's the printed words are on the screen and there's some music in the background. I really would like to get this. If anybody knows how to do these kind of movies really well, I'll hire you. I'm not kidding. I've hired 3 people so far to improve on my original movie that you're going to see here, and not one of them has been able to do it for some reason. I don't know. Any experts in PowerPoint here? All right, well, if you want to make some money, you know PowerPoint, call me. But this movie is basically just a short introduction to some of the women to give you an idea of who they are. And it's in 3 parts. The beginning talks about 9/11 and what happened that day. Then we also highlight some of the women who were killed that day. And then we talk about the aftermath of 9/11. Just talk amongst yourselves for 1 minute while I figure this out. I don't think so. Let's see. What's your name? Ariana or Ari? And you're the AV expert? So happy you're here. Okay. And could we have the lights off? Is that possible? light a candle in your memory, though I don't know who you are. And when I think about your family, I wish upon a star. And I pray that they'll find peace someday. I pray they'll make it through. I'll light a candle in your memory to honor you. I'll light a candle for America. May we feel peace inside. We'll hold each other closer and wipe the tears we cry. And I pray we'll fall together. And I pray we'll go. I'll light a candle for America. For me. Yeah. We will light the world with our I know we will light the world with our love, with our light candle for humanity, for the good that's yet to come, as we overlook our differences and join as one. And I pray we'll come out stronger in this world I'm dreaming of. A light candle for humanity, to be a world living in love. We will light the world with more love. Know that we can. We will light the world with more love. Every day and every way we will light. We will light the world with more love. I know that we can. I know that we will light. We will light the world with more love. A light candle for humanity, for all the good that's yet to come, as we all look our differences and join as one. And I pray we'll come out stronger in this world I'm dreaming of. A light candle for humanity, to be a world living in love. Candle, candle, light candle. Out of the ashes grew a seed, out of pain and human need. There grew a bloom that proved to be
stronger than the darkness. Within the rubble, there shone a light, far beyond our human sight. There was an ember that could not be put out. There was kindness and mercy, forgiveness and compassion as we reached out to hold each other's hands. There was giving and caring, something greater we were sharing. From the ashes there grew a seed of love. From despair there grew a tree. Out of the community, it was mighty and it was strong, offering its shelter. From the desert there sprang to life a place of refuge amidst the fire. A little peace that more powerful than fear. There was kindness, mercy, forgiveness, and compassion as we reached out to hold each other's hands. There was giving and caring, something greater we were sharing. From the ashes that grew a seed of love. Now we won't forget the heroes, the strangers whose faces we now know. But we'll honor them forever by planting seeds wherever we go. Let there be kindness and mercy, forgiveness and compassion as we reach out and hold each other's hands. Let there be giving and caring, something greater we are sharing. From the ashes, let us grow a seed.
These are all the people who died in these photos. Just at the rescue efforts, not of the thousands of civilians. These are fire EMT employees.
Mercy, forgiveness, and compassion as we reach out to hold each other's hands. Let there be giving and caring, something greater we are sharing. From the ashes, let's grow a seed of love. From the ashes, let us grow a seed of love.
And if we could get the lights back on, that would be great. So what happened for us was meeting these women and getting to know them. Like this woman that you see right here, her name is Lois Mungay. People call her Lou. She's the most highly decorated female firefighter in New York, or she was at that time. And she also has had to retire because she already had asthma before 9/11, and it became so life-threatening after 9/11 that she had to retire. Now she teaches fire safety to kids in schools. But Lois Mungay, see that little innocent face up there? That's the toughest talking little piece of work I've ever met in my life, okay? I'm gonna tell you right now that Lois Mungay is the only person I've ever met in my whole life who can actually create an entire paragraph out of the F word. It's amazing. It's like a thing of beauty, you know? And I'm not gonna exactly say what she said the first time we met her because it involves so much swearing, but I'm gonna paraphrase. She walked into our hotel room and she threw down this hat she was wearing because she's always throwing something down. She didn't even say hello to us. She said, look, and she didn't want to interview with us either. The only reason she interviewed was a good friend of hers that heard about the book we were writing, called her and told her she needed to be in the book. And Lois Mungay has no interest in anything like this. And she said, and when Lois found out we were putting her on the cover, she didn't talk to me for 3 months. She was like, and to this day, she sends me little cards all the time. And she always signs off, "Your freaking cover girl." You know, it was like that was the joke, that she was our cover girl, the person that would least want to be that. She came into our hotel room and she said, look, I'll tell you my freaking story, all right? But I'm not here to cry on your freaking shoulders and no freaking crap like that, all right? I'm gonna freaking tell you what happened. You take it for what it's freaking worth, and that's freaking that. You got it? And Susan, who comes from a little town in the Central Valley called Galt, which is so small you can put out any fire basically from in front of the firehouse with a long hose, you know, and she's never like encountered people like this. Susan was so scared when we first met her. And both of us thought, there's no way we're getting anything out of her. This is not a person who's going to open up and share her feelings. We asked her one question. Lois, can you tell us what happened that day? And we had a whole list of questions because we were prepared. Someone like this, you got to really work them. We asked her one question, what happened that day? And then we sat back for an hour and a half while she talked and she cried. And Lois told us later that not only had she not cried since she was like a child, but she's never cried since then either. She's just one of those people that's kind of tough and shut down. But that night, in that interview, when she told us on that morning, she was on her way to the firehouse. And by the way, Lois Mungay, she became a firefighter back when the male firefighters didn't want any female firefighters. They didn't want anybody of color. They didn't want a woman. If you were an Irish or Italian man, maybe, but that was about it. And so they weren't interested in Lois Mungay. Also, she's about 5'3". So men that don't want women around are going to immediately dismiss her. She can't do the job. How's she going to be a firefighter? Nobody talked to her in the firehouse for 3 years. Are you a firefighter back there in the back? Are you? Or are you just wearing a shirt that looks like one? You with the bun on your head? No, that just looks like a fire emblem. All right. So because it was different back then than it is now, no bathroom for her, porn everywhere, extra porn. As soon as a woman comes in the firehouse, load up on the porn. And nobody spoke to her. Now, when you're in a firehouse, you're eating meals together, you're sleeping together, you're going out on jobs together. And she said, Lois said, hey, I didn't become a firefighter to make frickin' friends, all right? I became a firefighter to fight frickin' fire. They don't want to talk to me? Frick them. That's what she said. And that's what it took. It took someone that tough to get through an entire firehouse of people hating her. Now, if you think it was just a little bit of an attitude that these women got, let me tell you about Captain Brenda Berkman, who was the first woman to become a firefighter in New York. She put in an application to become a firefighter. It's like 30 years ago. And they just laughed her out of the office. They wouldn't even let her submit the application. So she sued the city to be able to apply to become a firefighter, and she lost that lawsuit. So Captain Brenda Berkman, well, she's captain now, went out and enrolled in law school in New York and became an attorney and made a lot of money because she's really smart. She's on the ball. She made a lot of money being an attorney in this law firm in New York. And she became an attorney only to bring a class action lawsuit against the city of New York, which she did, and which she fought for 4 years while making a living as an attorney. When she won the class action lawsuit, after 4 years, she immediately gave her notice as an attorney and became a firefighter. And she was the first. and she's the one that took the majority of the hurt. She took the majority of it for the other women. She would be awakened in the middle of the night with a knock on the door, and it's the city coroner that's come with the morgue bus to pick up the dead body of Brenda Berkman. She would get death threats, and in the death threats, says, yes, hello, sorry, it's just somebody out there trying to get my attention. So wait, what was I saying? Freaking menopause, what? Death threats. But in these death threats, when they're, oh, I'm gonna kill you, bitch, and all this stuff on the phone, she can hear the firehouse radio in the background. So the calls are coming from the firehouse. They would pee in the women's boots. The boots are all lined up because you just got to jump in, you got to go. There's every single fraction of a second counts. So you got to boom, in the boots, you're out. So the men, not all the men, but some of the men would pee in the women's boots. And so then when they'd have to get into their boots, they'd have to go out like that. Like there's no time like, oh my God, what's happening? I got to fix. No, you just got to go. And they're working in these boots filled with pee. And then much more insidious is that one of the women had her tank, air supply tank, drained of air before going into a fire. Wow. That's serious. That's not a little like taunting or a little firehouse, initiations. That's attempted murder. So it was really, really hard on me. And the first women, almost all of them were lesbians because it required that you be a lesbian because lesbians care less what men think about them than heterosexual women. And a lesbian is more likely to be able to withstand all the slings and arrows. At least that's my philosophy for meeting these women and seeing what they went through. Now there's a lot more heterosexual women in those fields because there's more acceptance. But at the time, and actually younger women are probably different now too. Younger women are probably more like lesbians now. Is that true? Where they care less about what men think of them, or is it the same as it's always been? What do you guys think? Huh? The first one? You think young women now are more likely to care less, put less stock in what men think about them, and could withstand the insults and all of that. And the thing that's so interesting about all of that is when you really break it all down, it's just fear. It's just the men being afraid that the women are going to take something from them. But when you really find the maturity in these police departments and these SWAT teams and, where they're doing it right and they have women and men and there's a good blend, what they find is that it brings a balance. When you have these SWAT teams that have women on them, there's less deaths, there's less impetuousness, there's less impulsiveness. It's calmer. So when people say, well, a woman can't be a firefighter because she can't carry a 300-pound guy downstairs by herself, well, it's a ridiculous point. Firefighting is a group effort. It's a team effort. Nobody does it by themselves. So this is like a long struggle. And when we heard about what these women had been through, not just 9/11, but what they had been through in their careers, we really wanted to do something for them. And so we came up with this idea. We were kidding around, Susan and I. We were saying we should bring all the women from the book out to California and just mess with them, like get their auras read and make them go in hot tubs and just all this stuff that we just thought it was so funny to think of these tough New Yorkers coming out to groovy California and getting exposed to everything that we have out here. We were just kidding. And then one day we said, let's do it. Let's do it like we wrote the book. Let's invite them out. Let's plan on a big, all expense paid, high-end trip to the wine country. And then once we do that, we'll figure out how we're going to make it happen. That's what we did. So we invited them all out to California. We ended up raising a lot of money, and a lot of people jumped in and wanted to help. And we brought them to Healdsburg, California, because we had the first female chief of police in history in Healdsburg. Susan Jones had just got the job. And we also thought that you couldn't get farther away from Manhattan than Healdsburg. And so we brought all the women out, and I have a few photos that I want to show you from that time. Are you guys trying to say something to me, or are you talking? Was somebody trying to say something to me? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you were whispering something at me. All right. Okay. And could we get the lights down again, please, if it's not too much trouble? Or just turn them down. Just, yeah, because you can see it a little bit better, I think. Did you guys find you could see it better with the lights off? Screen? Okay. So we invited them. First of all, we invited them. That's what we did first. And then we figured out how to get the money for it. And it was a very intense, long-term fundraising thing that we did. Well, not that long-term, it was like 6 months, but all these volunteers came together, companies came together. What you see the people doing here in this photograph is that they're putting together these books for each woman of all the newspaper articles that were written about them before they came out to California. And we had people calling us. Once the word got out that we were doing this, it was amazing how much people wanted to help. Like, people out in California felt sort of helpless about all that had happened in New York. And so they came out. And this place called us, and this guy said he wanted to do a bike run. We said, that's great. So we went out there to meet him, and we had our bikes, like our 10-speed bikes, in the back of the truck. And we get there, and they're all dressed like, see the guy on the left with the sunglasses? They all show up on Harley Davidsons like that. And we just pretended like we knew all along it was going to be like that. And they did this Harley Davidson run and had a rock band playing and raised all kinds of money. It was amazing. Groups like the Seroptimus, Knights of Columbus, those kind of civic, Rotary Club groups have all kinds of fundraisers. They flew out women from New York, that's Sergeant Carrie Palacastro there, to raise money. And then places like Sonoma County Airport Express gave us a bus and a driver for the entire week to take women where they wanted to go. And there were all these volunteers. So if somebody wanted to go someplace in particular, like Carol Pockner has a room. She's the one I told you about on the crutches that I met the first night in the bar. She has a room in her home in New York that is dedicated to all things Budweiser. The whole room is full of Budweiser memorabilia. So she wanted to go to the Budweiser plant, which I guess is around here somewhere. And somebody else wanted to go to this mystery house, and they did whatever they wanted to do for that week. Okay. I am hitting the right button to get to the next one. Let me see, did I? Yeah, well, I used another button. Thank you. I'll just use that one. Thanks. And so they all show up. Okay, here's the Airport Express bus. And here's all the women showing up at Hotel Healdsburg in Healdsburg. And a bunch of the women had told me that they wanted to be low profile, because most of them are very humble, hardworking women, and they wanted to go low profile. And I said, that's fine. Don't open your mouth then at all. Like, don't speak, because their accents in Healdsburg created such a stir. Anywhere they went, you knew who it was. So, and then they wore things like that. So I guess that's a New Yorker's idea of being low profile. And Hotel Healdsburg was such a joy to give each of these women a private suite at Hotel Healdsburg, because this hotel is so posh. It's one of those poo-poo, posh places where none of the artwork makes sense. That's how you know it's like really up there. And all these women had these private suites. One woman came running down and said the bathroom was bigger than her apartment in New York. So, because they work on very little space in New York. We had a banquet, and Hillary Clinton, who was the state senator for New York at the time, she did this beautiful video for the women. All of these people came, local EMTs and firefighters and police officers, and there were so many people that wanted to help serve food. We'd have like one guy bringing out the little rolls on a plate, and then another guy would bring the butter. Like, we tried to separate everything so everyone would have a job. It was a beautiful night. And comedian Diane Amos, the Pine Sol lady on TV, and Suede, a singer, they came out and gave a really beautiful performance. And now this is Susan on the left, my co-author, and that is Captain Brenda Berkman on the bottom, getting interviewed at this banquet. And the reason they're getting interviewed is that we had flown them out on this airline, National Airlines. And it infuriated me that we had to buy tickets for them. I tried to get Tom Cruise to fly him out on a plane. I tried to get John Travolta to fly him on his plane. I tried to get Rosie O'Donnell to fly out on a plane with them that she would charter. And it just irritated me to no end that we had to actually pay money to an airline to bring these heroes over. And they landed in San Francisco. And when they landed, we found out that National Airlines went out of business and they had no return tickets home. And National Airlines wasn't like accepting phone calls, the website wasn't working, other airlines weren't honoring the tickets. So it ended up being this whole media campaign, who's gonna rescue the rescue workers? And it's really interesting because we brought 30 heroes of 9/11 out to California for this beautiful acknowledgement of their heroism. And yet we couldn't get anybody to support it. We couldn't get any news, local news that interested in it. We couldn't get any media coverage for them. It just wasn't that interesting. And until this happened, and for some reason that was, and we even went to the police department in Santa Rosa and asked them if they would support this, and they said they didn't support special interests. Can you imagine if I went to them and said, hey, I got 30 guys from New York. These guys are incredible. Police officers, firefighters, EMTs, did an unbelievable job. We're going to bring them out here and honor them. Would you help us? Do you think he ever would have said, we don't support special interests? But that's how it was. It's like, oh, it's women, so that's like a special interest thing. And the trip out here was the most healing, most incredible time for them because people came out in droves to thank them, and they had to come all the way across the country to get that. Some of the women that were sort of afraid of planes after 9/11, they had this idea that if they jumped out of one, it could help them heal, because that's how New Yorkers like to do therapy, I guess. So these women went up in full police uniform, no guns, and jumped out of planes, hugged each other, and that was it. And they loved it. The women visited the schools and talked to all these kids of all different ages, which was just beautiful. This woman right here, Nancy Ramos, is so shy. She cannot speak in front of people. We had her get up at this one thing we did, and her throat froze up. She couldn't speak. But when she heard that they had this multilingual school for English as a second language, and they needed someone to go speak, she put her hand up and she went and she talked to all those kids in Spanish and English. It's amazing. And there's Patty Lucci talking to the little kids. And some of the women are still pen pals with some of those kids. One of those kids wrote to one of the women who was an EMT, and the kid said, you were so brave. When you told me your story, you were so brave. And I get made fun of so much in school, and I don't know how to be brave. And this EMT started writing to her, and now they've been writing for 18 years. And she helped her through her whole school year. She had like the secret weapon in New York, this young girl did, that helped her all through her school life. And this was at a high school, and the principal said that she had never seen her students so quiet and so riveted. You know what, can you see this little thing when I'm pointing at this person? Is it showing up? I only put this picture in here because I think he looks like Johnny Depp. That's the only reason it's in there. I just like it. And here are the women abusing a child. So actually, Susan said that this is the women demonstrating a forcible entry tool. And it's so amazing. This is Lois Mongay, the woman that's on the cover of the book, and Captain Carrie Palacastro, and she is a major firefighter in New York now. Regina, she's incredible, and Mercedes. And it was so beautiful to see them at this thing like they are now, because when we had seen them in New York, it was so horrific. We did this book reading at Spreckles Theater, and I was so nervous about it because we didn't have time to do RSVPs and sell tickets and all that. We just announced it and put it out there. I was just so scared that we were going to get there and nobody would be there. We get there, it's standing room only. It's a good thing there were a lot of firefighters there because they were breaking every firewall with people in the aisles and in the back. And it was just such an incredible experience to have them get up, read a little bit of their stories. Most of them had not read the book because they couldn't handle it. And so a lot of them were hearing the other stories for the first time. And like this woman with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, which sounds like a great Friday night. Okay, but anyway, on we go. Kidding. All right. Inappropriate. And this picture, this is my favorite picture of the whole trip, and there were literally thousands of pictures taken. And this one is blurry, it's out of focus, it doesn't have all the women. But that's when they were getting a 15-minute standing ovation. That's when the audience would not stop clapping. And some of these women that had never shed a tear since 9/11, they cried that night at the outpouring of love and affection that they got here in Sonoma County. And I couldn't believe it. First of all, this is when we first were getting started with everything. I never thought men would buy the book. I thought 8 lesbian therapists in Berkeley would buy this book, frankly. That's what I thought. I didn't really think it was going to be like a big seller. And there's all these guys coming, and they're like buying cases of books. They're buying books to hold for their grandchildren. They're buying books to put in libraries and in schools. It was really incredible. And the women were there for so long. We told them, you can take off whenever you want. But they stayed there till the last person who wanted a book got one, till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then we're driving around Sonoma County trying to find pizza. And the women is like, are you people freaking barbarians? How do you not have pizza at 1 in the morning? You know, they just thought that was crazy. So we had to go to Safeway, buy frozen pizza, and then cook it at the chief of police's house. And the next day, we took them out to Armstrong Woods. And one of the women, Bonnie Gifried, Bonnie's the one that was pen pals with that young girl I told you about. Bonnie told me that she had never seen a tree up close. She had never seen a tree up. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Don't you walk past them and look at them? Or she said, no, there's just not a lot in my neighborhood. You know, I just never thought about it. Okay, so this is Bonnie right here. And this is what happens when you put a New Yorker like Bonnie in the woods, all right? So that was that day. And now this thing that cracks me up so badly is that Bonnie is like this nature-based minister. Like she ministers through nature. So it's all about getting people in touch with nature. And I just could not love that more. The wineries came out so incredibly. I really thought they would just be drunk for a week. I mean, really, because all the wineries wanted to do things for them, these beautiful meals, gorgeous 5-star chefs. This was at the Benziger Wine Cave. It's a mile long. And the women had this incredible dinner in there on their last night. And this was the morning that they were leaving to go back to New York, and we just hastily, assembled for this one quick picture and then drove. And as we were driving out of Healdsburg, we see on the side of the road, police officers, firefighters, civilians, veterans, all lined up as a sign of respect on both sides of the road, saluting the women as they drove past. And anybody that hadn't cried on the trip up till then, I just snapped a really quick picture in the bus as we were driving past them. None of us knew that that was going to happen. And then the bus gets pulled over in Petaluma. We're like, what's going on? There was this whole flurry of excitement, and the bus pulls over, and it's this cookie company in Petaluma that put together little bags of specialty cookies for each one of the women and came on the bus and passed it out. So even up till the last second, and we had to run out. I had to send somebody out to what's that big store, Kmart or whatever, to buy duffel bags the night before because the women had received so many gifts and so much love and so much to take home with them that we had to buy them extra suitcases. Also, they found out when they got home that all that wine they ordered and all those wineries to get shipped to them was all shipped free of charge, and their credit cards were never charged. Cases of wine. So they had an incredible experience here, and we raised so much money and we got so many donations that we had a lot of money left over, and we started a scholarship fund at Santa Rosa Junior College. And one of the daughters of one of our volunteers, Corey Reynolds, became a firefighter. She was the first one to use the scholarship fund, and she is a firefighter now. And this was us at the airport saying goodbye and thanking oh, by the way, JetBlue. So when I'm trying to get all these donated flights, at one point I called JetBlue and I talked to the president of JetBlue, and he cannot help us. I'm sorry, we just can't. We don't have that available. So then all this stuff comes down with national airlines going out of business. And I found out through this process that you can just call a state senator and sometimes they'll talk to you. I didn't know that. So we had been in contact with Hillary Clinton, so I called her and said, could you help us? She calls the president of JetBlue, then he calls me, and he and I both pretended like we had never talked before. Like neither one of us mentioned it at all. He was just like, wow, we'd really like to help you. And I'm like, wow, that's really great. And then he said, we're prepared to offer you a plane at 6 a.m. out of Oakland. And I said, oh, that time will never do. We need a plane around noon. Their busiest time. So we got a plane around noon out of Oakland, paid for by JetBlue. So we had this little sign made up. And then afterwards, we were just bawling our eyes out. And well, except Wendy, she was drunk a little bit right there. And it really was just, wait, let me go back to that picture. You see this up here? I had this in this movie for like 15 years before I noticed that over our heads. And it's really interesting, Dreams of Light, because so many dreams were activated by all of this. And I have a picture here closing out this movie of Moira Smith's daughter, because that's how old she was when her mother died. And her mother, Moira, was just full of heart. Oh my God, I love this woman so much. She so reminded me of me in some ways, everything I learned about her, that I developed this special feeling for her. And her partner, her police partner, said she couldn't even go out for a slice of pizza with her because, she would jump up at a moment's notice if she saw someone needed help. Didn't matter if she was in the middle of dinner or anything else, and run out there. And that's how she was on 9/11. They told her to go back to the police precinct, but she said, there's still people in there, I have to get them out. She went in and got more people out. You saw that picture of her leading that one guy out, and 15 minutes later, she gave her life. And so this is that hero's child, and I wanted her to be the last image that you see. Because one thing that's happened as a result of doing these talks and writing this book and people hearing about these stories is that these women and Moira's daughter and other people that we wrote about feel seen. They feel seen. And it's a horrible thing. God, it's a horrible thing to do your absolute best, to have your heart in the right place, to be out there trying to help people and to not be even acknowledged in the slightest for it. None of them were looking for glory, but for God's sakes, they deserved to be acknowledged. And the publisher, Penguin Putnam, had us rush the book out by the first anniversary of 9/11 because they wanted our book to come out and be the first book about the women heroes. And we killed ourselves to get that book out. And we shouldn't have bothered, because 18 years later, it's the only book out of over 200 books that have been written about the heroes of 9/11. It's the only one about the women. So although it may seem that we don't have to keep having these conversations, it may seem like women have made such big strides, it's like anything else. It takes a long time to settle into a balance, and we're just not there yet. And it's going to take men who are totally supportive and understand the value of men and women working together. And it's going to take women being willing to go into these roles and really, really sometimes take a beating like these women did. But they stuck it out, and now those fields are open to women because of them and because of what they did. So I thank you for taking this time. It's interesting to me that such young people are still interested in this, and I appreciate that because our history tells us what our future is going to be if we're paying attention, and I so appreciate you guys paying attention. So do we have questions, or we have the whole professional setup here, I think, with the microphones? Are these on? Are they live? Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. If somebody speaks, we can hear them. Does anybody have a question? Comment? What do you think about the new haircut? Is this working for me?
Yeah.
I told the hairstylist to do whatever she wanted, and then I looked up after she did it, and I said, okay, I wasn't really thinking 10-year-old boy, but thank you. Yes.
I have a question. My name's Daphne. So my question is, what type of self-care did you do for yourself while you were taking in all these?
I didn't do any self-care. I've recently become aware that what I thought was great equanimity on my part and just being very philosophical about things, like about 9/11, or I went into liver failure 8 years ago. I had a liver transplant. My father died. My house burned down. Like all these things that happened, I just felt like, I guess I just been through so much in my life that I'm just really mature, just can handle things. We just don't get upset. And lately something happened that made me aware that I'm not really so philosophical and mature. It's more like I'm emotionally shut down. It's something I developed when I was a little kid because I came out of a horrendous situation. And so I sort of tamped down all that horror and built a life on top of it. And so if I'm answering your question honestly, I did no self-care. I just powered right through it. My partner who wrote the book with me was crying every day. When we went down to 9/11 to Ground Zero and came back to the hotel, and she looked at her shoes and saw all this dust all over her work boots, and she realized it was all human remains mixed in with that. Like, she cried for 2 days. And I remember thinking, wow, it's a good thing one of us can hold it together, it's good when you have two people and sort of balance each other. And so, yeah, I think self-care is really important, and it sort of takes an understanding of yourself. And I don't know that we all have that. For me, it's an evolving thing. My partner took care of herself by talking about her feelings a lot and by staying in when she needed to and taking long baths and all that. Whereas I was on the computer like constantly, and she told me one time I wanted something from her at 1 o'clock. So I went, knocked on her door and asked for it. And then I think it was like 5 in the morning, I asked her for something. And she was like, Mary, we've got to get some sleep. You can't keep bothering me. And I'm like, well, if I can't talk to you, when is my window of opportunity? And she said, I don't know, maybe between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. Can we go with that? Because I was just like driven. And so she did take better care of herself. Yeah. It's weird to answer that honestly. All right, anything else? I think people are much better now with understanding even the need for self-care. Like I was watching this woman the other day talk about body positivity, fatness, and I was just so drawn into that. Like, oh my God, when I was a fat kid, it never occurred to me you could be positive about it, or it would be okay, or it wouldn't be totally disgusting, right? We're in a whole new world now. So hopefully people understand that. All right, you guys, I think, yes. Well, one thing, steps to move in a direction where women are being heard. One thing that's really something that I see so much is that, we were silenced for many, many years. That was the pattern. When Me Too happened, I don't know if any of you women that are older have experienced this, but when Me Too happened and my awareness started being raised, I started realizing all the things that had been done to me. Like all the things, like my first sexual experience, it was a drug and a rape. I didn't know that. I thought that I had a weird reaction to one sip of a drink, and then I woke up all confused. I didn't know. Me Too helped put it in perspective. It brought it to the surface. And so one thing that I see is women not saying enough. Yesterday, I told you I was at my brother's strip club, and he's got a secretary that's worked for him for many years, and this guy comes in the office to tell her something, and the way he said it to her, I was so taken aback. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. How do you come in here so rude and your chest all puffed out and your arms like this? It's so aggressive. Lower your tone. Don't ever talk to her like that. And I talked to her afterwards, and I said, do you put up with that? She said, oh, Mary, he's been doing that so many years. She goes, I'm just used to it. And then she calls me that night, last night, she texts me and said, you know what, when I thought about it, I realized all those times when he talks to me like that, I'm upset when I go home and I have a problem sleeping. But it wasn't until it was stirred up a little that she realized, oh my God, you can't let somebody talk to you like that. So what I do, just me, one individual, I just call it out right in the moment, like right in the moment, whatever I'm doing. I had a doctor a few weeks ago, and I fired him right in the middle of the consult because I said, my problem is that you're speaking to me in such a patriarchal, patronizing, almost condescending way that I don't want to hear what you have to say, even if you're brilliant, because I feel so personally offended by the way you're speaking to me. And you could tell he was so shocked. He talks like that to everybody. You can tell he was very casual in how he did it. And he was so shocked that someone said something. And I guarantee you he will think twice with how he says something. So we have to speak up. We can't let somebody walk all over us, and then sue them. That's in some ways how it rolls out. No, these are our brothers. Let's talk to them. Let's love them. Let's teach them. Let's not let them treat us in a way that their conditioning might lead them to do. Let's help them. So I think a lot of it is on us to speak up, and men are becoming aware more and more. And I think the younger guys, a lot of them are so beautiful. The younger guys, they're just different. They're not so much like they used to be. So I think we're getting there, but it requires our voices to be the strongest in this conversation. Okay. I really should never do questions and answers because I'm so opinionated. I hate it when I go someplace and they have questions and answers, and then the person gives such long answers. I'm like, okay, we get it, just move it along. So I usually don't do questions and answers for that period. So I think I'm going to wrap it up, but I'll stay here if anybody wants to talk to me one-on-one or you have any questions. I'll be here. But are you guys okay if we wrap this up now? You that are working here, we're all good? All right, I just want to thank you so much. I can't believe that more than 3 people were here on this coronavirus day. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.